loud. Thank you everyone for coming to Career Development Thursday. We're excited for today. It's been a very busy time for agents. We're seeing lots of multiple offers, and this has come by agents asking for it. And Melinda volunteered. She has some great things to share with us, and Michael as well. And then after they're done, they're going to turn it over for Q&A and a roundtable discussion. We want to hear from everybody, but please write your questions down unless they open it up for questions so we can kind of move along, and then we'll do our questions and answering. So I'm going to let Melinda take over from here.
We can get it in there.
Everybody can mute themselves too if they don't mind until they need to ask a question.
Good morning, everyone. I don't know that I have a whole bunch of great things to share, but I do have just some information on the escalation clause. I know you're all muted, but I can see most of your faces. For the ones that I see, if you'll put your hand up if you've had to use an escalation clause in the last few months or weeks. Yes. So I'm just going to review what you put in the escalation clause and what it means and when to present it and when I present it. And then hopefully the rest of you all will chime in with what you've done with yours and some tips. I mean, I certainly don't have all the answers. I think we can all learn from each other on how you've been using the tools that we present when we have these meetings. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. This is the first time doing this, so hopefully it works. Can you hear me okay? Everybody can?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to bring the escalation clause up. I don't know what is being used in Maryland. In West Virginia, I'm using the Virginia escalation clause because I don't believe we have the Eastern Panhandle. Diane, I see you shaking your head, so I'm assuming you all don't have something you've been using unless you all been just writing it up, or maybe you have an old form. But Sheila, if you want to just make note that I was thinking about this earlier, we probably need to share. I don't know that everyone has access to the NBAR forms. That's question number one. And then question number two, well, not a question, but a statement. If they don't, then we should probably send the escalation clause addendum out to CV agents so everyone has it.
Okay.
Well,
You're going to have to allow me to share, Sheila. It's telling me that.
Yes, I'm actually doing that right now, getting ready to put you as host. There you go.
Okay. So it's just basically a one-page addendum, and you just put your contract information in at the top, the purchaser's name, the seller's name, the property. And then there's two more blanks here to fill in. Basically, it says the contract sales price shall automatically increase to an amount. Somebody's going to need to mute on their end.
You're host now. Can you just mute all?
Well, I could. You're going to tell me how.
Steven's on here. He can get you to it quicker. It should be down at the bottom.
Click participants.
Sorry. Hold on. I'm having this user error here. I do not have that button now. I did while ago.
I'm sorry, you're on share mode, so it's probably going to be at the top. And on mine, it's at the bottom because I'm not sharing my screen. I don't remember what it looks like on the share mode. I mean, I can tell you who's unmuted right now. It's Judy Wolfrey's the only one other than Sheila and myself that's unmuted. Everybody else is muted.
All right. Well,
but you can actually just click on Judy and mute her. You can click on her. If you hover over her picture, you can mute her.
Okay. Sorry, guys. Let me get to it. Judy. I don't see her. Okay. I'm moving on. You all figure that out. So contract sales price shall automatically increase to an amount which generates a net, it's an important word, a net to seller equal to blank above any other offers net to seller, not to exceed a maximum sales price of blank. So I typically use $1,000 in the first blank. You can put whatever you want to put in that blank. I think it's probably more meaningful if it's a higher number rather than a lower number. And what the net is, if you look at the very last sentence of this paragraph, in this addendum, the term net is defined as the sales price, typo there, sales price less all seller concessions. So that's important because it's not just the amount of the offer, it's the offer minus the sales, minus the seller concessions. So if somebody's offered $200,000, the seller's paying $5,000 in closing costs, obviously the net is going to be $195. So it's the net that they're working with. Your offer will escalate. That's where the word escalation comes from. Will escalate to $1,000 above the net of the next highest offer up to your buyer's max. So I just did one the other day, and my purchaser offered $430,000. We did $1,000 above any other offers net to a max of $450,000. So there's if we forget to talk about it, we need to talk about the lender letter that we put with this for their qualification purposes as well. So I don't know, Michael, you might want to cover that in your portion, but so you want to make sure, of course, that your buyer is qualified for the max amount that you put in that block there. It's kind of, and I think that's self-explanatory. We'll wait till the end if you guys have any questions about that particular item, but just remember that the important thing there is that it's the net to the seller. So something that I want to add here, and we can talk about that further as well, is that I had to, in that scenario that I just gave you, my purchaser actually did not win the multiple offer contest. They lost out. Of course, they always want to know why, and we won't know why until we get to, until the property goes to closing and we look it up in the MLS and try to figure it out from there. The thing that I want to caution you about is that you're going to have some questions from your buyer down the road if they find out. So my escalation was to $450. Let's say the offer they accepted actually was $440. It's always about the amount of money on your escalation addendum. It's the terms as well. And you have to be able to explain that to your purchasers, that they may not just looking at the dollar amount. I have had several listings here lately that have all had multiple offers on them, and my seller didn't always take the highest offer because I explained to him that, look, just because they say that they want to give you $25,000 more than what we have it listed for, there's other things to consider. Is it going to appraise? So in those, a couple of those cases, my seller actually did not take the highest offer, and we did not enact anybody's escalation addendum because there was better offers on the table that we didn't have to worry about the appraisal. There were less concessions. There might have not been any home inspections or radon inspections. You might have a cash offer and seller wants a quick close. So it's the whole package that, whether you're on the buyer side or you're on the seller side, you need to be prepared to be able to explain that to your client on how all of that works. And it's not always the best amount of money, the highest amount of money. So just keep that in mind, and we can talk about that more when we open it up for discussion. So the second section here is going to be appraisal. Option 1 waives the appraisal valuation. Option 2 retains appraisal. Unless you have a buyer that's paying cash or has a lot of cash, option 1 is probably not going to be an option. You're going to almost always mark option 2 retains appraisal. You do not want the appraisal language being removed unless your purchaser or your client has the ability to move forward without an appraisal. Uh, most of them, probably 95% of them, are not going to be able to do that, so it's going to be option 2. So under the box that is highlighted here, the seller, so if they do enact your escalation clause and say, you know, we had to use your escalation clause, we escalated it to X amount of dollars, the seller's agent is supposed to fill this section out and give it back to you with what that escalated price was and what the terms were. So you know why your escalation was enacted. You do not get this back if you lose out. You only get this if they had to use your escalation clause for you to win the multiple offer contest. And basically that's it. The rest of it pretty much pertains to that rest of the terms of the contract remain the same. Everybody, this is a binding agreement. Everybody agrees and yada, yada. And basically that's it. So I think we were going to, Stephen, weren't we going to go to Michael next and then open it up for questions? Or Sheila, I'm sorry. How do I give the share back?
Go to me, or actually, Michael is actually going to share anything, you can go to his name.
Amen.
Michael, are you sharing anything?
I'm not going to share my screen.
Okay.
Obviously, Melinda did hit on some key topics there. The appraisal situation. Is an appraisal going to come into play? Do you have a cash or 20% down conventional buyer that an appraisal can be removed? I've always tried the buyer to consider odd numbers rather than those nice rounded 200,000, 199.9. Go in at $200,137. Throw some little extra on there, on top of the escalation clause.
Thank you.
Everybody will do the, 199. I'll beat any other offer by $500 or $1,000 up to a maximum of 210,000. But if you just put that little extra crazy number on there, it could win you it could win the deal for you, and you paid an extra $137 or something crazy like that. It has worked for me in the past. It also happens to work on bidding on HUD properties. Just throwing that out there. As Melinda mentioned, it's not always the highest and best number as far as the true highest net. So condition your buyer to consider skinning down some of their contingencies, home inspection, shorten the time period on the home inspection, suck it up and pay for their own well and septic, anything that you can make your offer stand out and look a little bit better than the competitors. It could win the day for you. Obviously, you as a agent working with the buyer most of the time is looking out for the buyer's best interest, and it's up to you to try to negotiate the best offer for your client. And it seems almost counterproductive to say, oh, well, I want you to pay more than list price. Emphasize to them how the market is selling. It might not be that hard of a sale because they'll want to see a property that just came on the market yesterday and it's already gone with multiple offers. And usually once that happens to them once or twice, they'll realize that you weren't trying to push them to buy the house for more than list price, that's what's actually going on in today's market. So the escalation clause works fantastic. Had a situation here maybe 2 weeks ago, maybe a little bit longer. And the issue was on the seller side, both escalation clauses were different formats. One of them didn't mention net. It just said what the escalation was. So we had to make the call when presenting it to the seller that we were going off of the net. And like I said, both the formats of the escalation clauses were different. We did a side-by-side net sheet to determine which one suited the seller the best. And the seller actually just counteroffered both parties to come up with their highest and best and kind of kicked the escalation clause to the curb. But in a lot of cases, yeah, the escalation clause will be enacted and will allow your client, if they did make it as clean as possible, removing the contingencies, provide their good pre-approval letter rather than a pre-qualification letter. Things of that nature will make you come in first place, and you don't have to show them properties anymore. So anyways, I'm going to kick it back to Sheila or Melinda. Either one of you ladies, please take it away.
I do.
Melinda, can you
Unmute.
make me host again? Because I need to control of the recording. It's not letting me do it.
All right, hang on a minute, Sheila. I have
I
a
took
question.
control. I'll give it to you, Sheila.
Okay.
I have a question, Michael.
Yes, ma'am.
On with your REO background, and Tracy, I see Tracy's on too, and she might be able to chime in on this. Kevin had a situation with this the other day on a foreclosure property where you have to put the offer on. Typically they will not accept an escalation clause. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Read my mind, Melinda. I was going to ask the same thing.
Yeah,
Hey,
that is,
Sheila, I wanted to add that when they, agents do, when you do have an escalation clause, it's so important. This is when the seller or the buyer is really depending on your skills. And I used to always make columns of what each contract was with the name, what they were asking for, any concessions, what their offer was, so that when you go in to present this, you're not just scrambling around with 5 or 6 contracts. It looks as though you really have, and you should have looked at these and made the best offer for your seller or buyer. It's my suggestion.
June, I think we're going to talk about that when we have our multiple offers session. Sheila,
Okay.
that's a couple weeks, correct?
Right.
Okay.
And one more comment on the foreclosure side. So I would reach out to the agent before writing the offer just to clarify that they're not accepting escalation clauses. You don't want to assume. Probably 90% of the time they'll tell you no, but you don't want to set the expectation to your buyer that, well, we're going to do this escalation clause, and then you look like an idiot because they kicked it back. But you also want to make sure, because maybe it's some weird bank that actually would accept an escalation, and now you've taken yourself, out of the running because you didn't ask. So I would at least reach out to the listing agent and ask before writing the offer.
And I think there's going to be another question that comes up about when to present the escalation clause. Do you do it because the listing agent has told you there's multiple offers coming in? Or do you just go ahead and put it with your offer because you're expecting that there's going to be multiple offers on that property? So I don't want to lead anyone. I'd like for somebody else to chime in and answer what they think they should do in that situation.
I think you go ahead and add it right out of the gate. With the market that we've got going on now, don't wait to find out that there's multiple offers and then scramble around to do it. Just go in there and add it right out of the gate.
Anyone else?
I agree with Michael. I just put mine, especially in the Shepherdstown area. You almost have to have, you pretty much know that there are going to be multiple offers. So I go ahead and put it in my original offer.
Tracy put in the chat that she does it automatically as well.
What about
I an offer and submitted it before I showed the property with an escalation clause.
Pardon?
Contingent, the buyer seeing the property. It's crazy.
what about in a normal market? Like, I know that we have a very unique situation right now, but in a normal market, would you still do that, or would you wait and see if there's multiple offers? Would you still put an escalation clause on a property that's been on the market for 200 days?
I'm going to answer that. If our days on market are what we consider normal and we're not getting multiple offers, I typically would not put an escalation clause with it. There's going to be some questions, I'm sure, from the newer agents that aren't you exposing what your buyer is willing to pay for the house? And there is some concern with that, and because you may not be offering full price on the house. So let's say the house is listed for 190 and your buyer wants to offer 185, but they'll escalate to 195 if other offers come in. So can we talk about how we would handle that situation and what would happen if the seller comes right back at 195 and doesn't have any other offers in hand?
Adam seems to have an opinion about that.
I think personally, I would probably reach out to the agent first and ask if you don't know what kind of activity it's had, I'd ask, has it been having a lot of activity? I'd kind of feel the pulse of the property before I laid out all my cards. But if you know the market and you know it's a hot property, that more than likely I'd probably do it first, but I wouldn't off the bat do it first until I had a little bit of knowledge about what the activities going on the property. And then also, if I did put it in first like that, I'm going to put it in. I'm not sure if it's having multiple offers coming in. I'm going to put my response time shorter too. I'm not going to put a long response time on there. I don't know, that can backfire too. I mean, so what's everybody think about your response time?
So let me just comment first on the chat. So Wendy says she doesn't do them automatically. Adam has an interesting twist on it that I kind of agree with. I don't put it in first. I think that's a slight to the seller suggesting that you'd pay more, but not right now. It's an interesting way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
Can I expand on that just for a second with Adam? Is he saying that he doesn't put it in first, but does if he already knows there's multiple offers? Does that make sense?
That's yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Last week, what I did with a home that I thought would have multiple offers, I gave him 1 day. I just like, I'm giving you 24 hours to get back with us. And it worked to our benefit.
I like Michael's comment too. Michael could just say it. He was answering Beth's question. He said possibly and maybe if the seller had a significant price reduction after 200 days. So that's.
So they just repositioned it in the market. So then there might be multiple offers at this point.
That's what it looks like.
Yeah, I was muted, but yeah, if they had moved their property down to the proper price point, I'm sure that had something to do with either condition or it was priced inappropriately for 200 days. Now they've seen the light. And with things selling in certain specific markets real quick, that might, anytime you do that price reduction, that property shows back up in the automatic MLS searches or the bright searches and gets sent out to those buyers. So the, dinner bell might have just got rung and it's going to be a feeding frenzy.
One thing I definitely agree with is Melinda when she said, it's not always the price, it's the terms. I had one that we were in competition. It was a Shepherdstown property, and I mean, it's closed, so I can say the list price was $250. Our buyer was cash, and she could only go $240. So we waived the appraisal and radon. We waived everything, but not the home inspection. And as it turned out, it was a good thing we did not waive the home inspection because there were several repairs and one was structural. So, but she still got the offer, even though the agent told me that they had escalation clauses up to $270. But because of the terms, that's why our buyer was able to get the property. So I definitely agree with Melinda. It's not always the price.
Type alone. Don't everybody talk all at once, guys.
Is there any other questions, or has anybody else done them that they can share their words of wisdom like Melinda had asked?
Linda, will you go over the difference between the net and just the, however the wording on, I heard Michael say some of them say net and some of them don't. The one that we use here in Virginia says net on it, correct?
That's correct. So I think somebody mentioned the estimate of net sheet for the seller. Stephen, I think mentioned that. So if you are the listing agent and you're the one dealing with these multiple offers, and again, we're going to go over a lot of this when we have our multiple offer session, but you're going to need to do the seller's estimate of net, which we have one in the Virginia NDAR forms. I use that one for my West Virginia people as well. I know that there is not one in the Eastern Panhandle Board of Realtors forms. It's another one that we can, I think we have it added in our zip forms for you guys in West Virginia. But anyway, you can fill that out. And so at the bottom would be your net number. But if it's not the net, I don't know why somebody would put an escalation in that wasn't a net, because that's already doing part of the terms by showing whether they're paying closing cost or not. But I'm not sure what I would do in that situation. I hadn't considered that I would get an escalation clause that would be like that. I probably would go back to the agent and that submitted the one that wasn't a net and talk that over with them about what their intent was. Michael, was it you that said you received one like that? You all received one in your office? How did you, can you review again how you all handled that with the client again?
Well, we compared them side by side, and we were agreeing to pay X amount over the other offer. And the other offer actually had closing costs involved. So were we offering more than the net involving closing costs, or more than just what they were offering? So we kind of had to make a judgment call and go off the net, which, you know, makes the most sense. And ultimately, after doing that and presenting them both to the seller, both of them were, I'm trying to remember, that they were both probably about $15,000 to $20,000 less than list price, because the house had been on the market. And they both actually, the escalation took it right up to list price. And the seller just said, you know, pardon me, the escalation clauses come back with your highest and best. And both parties just came back with their highest and best, and he ended up taking a good offer and ended up getting about, I think it was about 93% of list price. And after being on the market for, I think, about 170, 180 days, you know, they were happy, everybody was good, and we moved forward and closed it. One of the agents, completely to steal one of Stephen's sayings, you know, spilled his candy in the lobby, and he basically, you know, said everything that the buyer would do, and this, that, and the other. So, and we didn't even ask. We didn't even ask for all that information. He just kind of told us, you know, that his buyer would basically do what it needed to get done to get this house. And yeah, we just hit highest and best, and got it sold.
So I think the takeaway with this is back to your, Liz, back to your question is that it should always come down to the net to the seller. Is what's the maximum amount the seller's going to get in the least amount of time with the less headache that they have to go through, and that all goes back to the terms of the contract. So if they have a clean contract, it doesn't ask for a bunch of inspections and a bunch of contingencies and all of that, you have to help your seller decide by filling out your net sheet and then giving them an overview of each one of the offers that you have on the table. And knowing, you know, with your buyer, to be able to explain all of this to your buyer about how it works. I think that's the most important thing of all, because they're going to be mad at you if they don't get their house. I mean, they're either going to be extremely disappointed. I've had them where they didn't talk to me for a couple of days because they were just so upset about it. They weren't upset at me. They were upset at this. They lost the house they thought they were moving into. But even when you're listing a house, the net sheet is one of the most important tools that I use. And one of my sayings to them is on a listing is that, let's face it, the most important thing to you is the money you're walking away with at the table, isn't it? And you want them to say yes, because it is. They can say it's not about the money, but it is. So it doesn't really matter, and sometimes I say this, it doesn't really matter what you list it for. What matters is what you're walking away with in the end. And that is typically the most important thing for your seller, is whether you're on the side of with the buyer or you're the listing agent.
There is a strategy, and it just occurred to me to say this, to have I would say a ridiculous escalation clause. And if the seller would take it and the house doesn't appraise, they will work with you. I don't advise doing this, but you got a house listed for 200, you know, some crazy person comes in and says, you know, I'll go 250 on it. And you know, it's not going to appraise. If the seller would take that and then it falls apart and it only appraises for 200, are they going to work with you? Possibly. You know, rather than
I had that happen last week on a listing that I have in Winchester. The ridiculous offer was $20,000 more than list price. I presented all the multiple offers to my seller. And the seller is a trustee of the property, so he doesn't have any emotions attached to the properties, let me say that. And we ended up taking a lesser offer first, and it was cash. And the terms is what won that offer. But we immediately found out the lady had cold feet and the agent was so apologetic and all this stuff. So within 2 hours, we were rid of that offer and we had another offer. I mean, we had accepted the second offer that was the next best one. And that was the one that was $20,000 more. We knew that it wasn't going to appraise. Seller knew it wasn't going to appraise. Agent knew it wasn't going to appraise, but they had a clean offer overall. So we knew that if it didn't appraise, as long as it appraised for at the list price, that the seller was okay with that, because they were already willing to accept that because that's what we had it listed at, if that makes sense. So the appraisal came in the other day and it was $10,000 less than the offer price that was agreed upon, but it was $10,000 more than our list price. So both parties in this one won. So that has happened, Michael. So that's a very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up because I have a real life scenario with that going on.
Adam put in the comments that on the seller side should suggest an escalation should remove the appraisal requirement. What does he mean by that, and how does that work?
Let me read it here.
Well, the buyer's going to have to show that they have enough cash to make the deal work out if the appraisal doesn't come in at the agreed upon sales price. So chances are you're going to need that cash buy or a 20% down conventional guy or somebody that's just has those types of resources.
So you're saying that somebody can put in that crazy offer above list price if they have cash and they take away the appraisal, then that's an ideal offer. Like, I mean,
well, yeah, you as the seller would counter offer that crazy offer and remove that appraisal contingency, and then you'll see if they're for real or not. Because you don't have to go back to everybody. You could choose one that you want to deal with.
okay, makes sense.
Adam also put in, said, should the buyer escalation increase to include the value escalation for tests or inspections that are not the same, i.e. offer a seller pays the septic versus the buyer pays the septic, or offer A would escalate to cover that cost? I'm hearing yes. So if anyone wants to comment on that.
I think what I'm understanding that he's saying, and definitely correct, Adam, if I'm not understanding what you're saying, is that if the offer does escalate, so if they do enact your escalation clause and take your escalation, that it would switch from the buyer paying for those inspections to the seller paying? Is that what you're saying?
I think maybe he's saying that there's two offers, and offer A, seller pays it, and then an offer B, the buyer pays it. So we need to make sure that the seller is aware of those costs. Is that right?
Yeah, if Beth, if that's what you're saying, that does make sense. Yes, that would.
Yes. So what I'm suggesting is that like the offer A may not have the seller covering well, septic, termite, all that stuff, radon included, maybe even, and the cost of putting a radon system in, etc. Can you add all that into the buyer's escalation so that the seller is not going to have to pay those? Ultimately, it's going to come out of they'll pay for them, but it's going to come out of the buyer's escalation. And should you escalate to cover those things, even though the buyer is suggesting that the seller pays for them?
So you're saying like maybe the first part, like your first offer, the seller does it, and then the escalation is that the buyer says will take it?
No, you're going to have multiple offers in this situation. So offer A says, buyer's going to take care of all these repairs, but they're only paying $300. The escalation may say, hey, we'll go up to $325, but seller's going to pay for X, Y, and Z. So then do you add the cost and escalate up to cover those expenses? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. I personally probably wouldn't muddy my escalation with a bunch of extra stuff.
Kind of how I feel also. But I'm pretty sure if Paula was on the call, she might argue a little bit differently.
Well, you win, Adam, because she's not on the call.
Hey, you can do whatever you want to do. You just got to make sure that you know how to explain it if it gets enacted. So I'm not going to say that you can't. I probably wouldn't, but doesn't mean you can't or shouldn't.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
like
it goes
we were
back
saying-
to making the buyer want to win that competition. Basically, though, like you said, they're going to be upset if they don't, even though they had the higher number. So.
Well, like we were saying earlier, making it as clean as possible, and that's kind of adding some extra stuff in there if you're adding all those additional charges and then backing them back out if the seller pays it. So, yeah, that was just making it more difficult, I think, than you want to at that point if it's in a multiple offer situation.
And also for the seller agent, it's hard to go back and explain that to the seller. So your offer might be disqualified just because, it might be it might not consider it as much just because it's so complicated that the seller itself is like, I don't even want to look at that offer anymore.
I agree.
To Adam's point, Adam, if you're going to put an escalation clause in, or if you know there are multiple offers, why wouldn't you just, on some, I've just put that automatically the buyer pays for well, septic, and termite. It's really not that much money, but to the seller, it's one less things that they have to consider to pay for. So it's already part of when you do your net to the seller, you can show that they're not paying for those. Well, if you have well, septic, and termite, well, termite most of the time, but sometimes not well and septic. So a lot of times just, the buyer's capable of and really wants the house. I mean, that's one way to kind of is just to go ahead and automatically have the buyer pay for it.
But just put it in
It's
simple.
on your market. It all depends on your market and the house. And I mean, there's just a lot of things to consider, but that's one thing. You don't have to then in the escalation clause, if you have to do an escalation clause, you don't have to muddy the waters. Like you said, it's already that the buyer's paying for it. So it comes, so you can show the seller that the net, that's not going to come out of their proceeds.
I think what
Often thought
Melinda,
that they seller likes to look at very clean transactions, not too many things in there they've got to think about. And once it's done, they want it sort of clean and well written so that there's not a lot of objects out there that they have to contend with. And I've seen them not take the offer simply because they want to stay longer in their house till their kids finish school. So it comes to the money, but it doesn't always come down to the money.
Well, making it clean, I agree with, I believe Wendy was saying about doing that, basically that net sheet that basically hits all the bullet points so the other agent doesn't have to go through the, 50 pages of the contract to find out the bottom line. Just bullet point it all up front on a cover sheet, make it real nice and easy and right to the point.
Michael, to address that, I have a seller synopsis sheet that I do, and it's just really simple. It just highlights the points of the contract, and it makes it real easy to see, what the buyer's requirements are.
Can you send that out, Diane?
I sure can. I mean, it's my own, but I mean, don't take any offense on it. I mean, it's my own, but I sure will send it out.
Oh, it'd be helpful. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Melinda, what office are you working out of today?
Oh, isn't it beautiful?
It is. I'm
I
jealous.
transformed my home office into a CB office. Isn't it beautiful?
Don't give it away, Melinda. That's our new office. They just haven't seen it yet. I'm kidding. I'm totally joking.
It's my own personal office.
Casa de Ball.
I think the bottom line, what I'm hearing and what I understood when I used to do them is, honestly, when you're working with the buyer and it's a home they really want, you know what you've been with them, you want to win it, but you don't want to put them in jeopardy of losing a home because they're buying more and they're overextending themselves. So I think us knowing the buyer and then just educating them that let's make the highest and best offer we can. Let's make this as clean as possible. That is going to be simple for the seller, and put our best foot forward to win, and then just just say that's all we can do, but everybody is bringing so many good topics up here. I love it.
Adam just asked a good question about anybody, how much do you recommend going over list price or on the escalation? 500 and 1,000 seem to be pretty common. Anybody have any input on that?
I still think it depends on the price and the location of the property and the qualification of your buyer. I mean, I had a property one time we offered 10,000 over, and they actually had to spend this was way back when, but we offered 10,000 over and they spent about 50,000 over the list price, but they had to have that 10,000 or they would have lost it. So it all depends on your market and your buyer. And I mean, sometimes, like Michael said, you put kind of an odd number in there. But, it comes down to every case is different and every circumstance is a little different. I don't think you can say to put 200, 300, 1,000, 2,000. It just all depends.
What about the increments?
Well, I'm saying, that's what I guess I'm talking about, the increments of what you put in and then not to exceed. So like I said, at one time, our increment was 10,000 over the next highest. I've done them for 2, then sometimes you only do 100, depending on the price of the house and just the market. So it just depends. I don't think you can say increments of a certain amount. You just have to know your market, know your buyer, and go by that. And I will say I don't write as many contracts as everybody else in the Shepherdstown office. Michael can tell you that, because I'm in South Carolina. So I do do
You
what I,
just write contracts that are significantly higher in price than everybody in Shepherdstown does.
I wouldn't say that, but anyway, we do our best.
But yeah, I think that what would be good is you know that price point. You know, are you in a $50,000 price point, $100,000 price point? $500 would probably get it done as the increments. But if you get up to $350,000, $400,000, $500,000, you may need to step it up to $1,000, maybe even more than that, because at that point, it's all those other details that might be what wins the property. Are you going to waive a home inspection? Are you going to waive the appraisal? How much is an extra $1,000 versus somebody that's waiving a home inspection because, heaven forbid that, they go in there and tear the house apart on the home inspection and, come up with more than $1,000 worth of repairs, or somebody's doing radon and you're not doing radon. So there's some risks there. So, at the end of the day, that $1,000 is basically going to be about $4.50 on a mortgage. So, sometimes, I used to memorize the amortization charts back when standard market rates were 6%. 6% was $6 a month. So if you're going to beat somebody out by $1,000, can you guys pay an extra $6 a month to get this property? How much do you want it? So that's something that I always did, was break it down on the cost on a monthly basis if you're going a couple grand more than somebody else. And right now with the interest rates just being like, it's all but free money, that extra $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 is going to be like $10 or $12 a month, and skip a couple Happy Meals every month and get the job done.
So Melinda, before we close out, are you going to put the escalation addendum on the West Virginia, on the Eastern Panhandle Board docs in zip forms?
I'm going to make a note to do that right now.
I mean,
Yes, I can add that to the template.
thanks.
Yeah. And Michael, I don't believe there's one in Maryland either, is there? Kevin's telling me there is. Okay, never mind.
Pretty sure.
Yeah, it's the first one I ever got, and I was dealing with a very experienced agent on the selling side. She called me and she says, "I've never seen one of these before. Could you explain it to me?" And I got a big kick out of it, and my folks paid $500 more than list price and got the property, and yay me, and yay my buyers, because the other agent didn't have one, and it was a multiple offer situation.
Well, if there's no other questions, we want to thank Michael and Melinda for everything that words of wisdom they gave to us today. I don't want to cut it short if anybody has any other questions, because this is a really good topic. I've learned stuff.
Sheila, do you want me to send that synopsis just to you and then you'll send it to everybody else?
I can't, or if you send it to Stephen, what we're trying to do is
Okay.
let a lot of things flow and Stephen put things out so we're not bombarding too many emails.
Will do.
Is that okay, Stephen? He's busy.
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. Thank you, Diane. We appreciate it.
Well, I
Okay.
have one other thing that's not on this topic, but that I use that may be helpful is, I know the Eastern Panhandle Board just sent out like a transaction sheet for, to send, but I have an attorney data sheet that I send to all of my attorneys that has everything on it. And if you would like for me to share that, I would. I mean, because it goes down buyer, seller, deed book, price, whether there's a home warranty, closing costs. I mean, it basically says everything that's in the contract. And I know they read the contract too, but it's kind of a guideline. And so far, most of them have liked it. So I'd be happy to share that if you would like.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
Michael or Melinda, you have anything else?
I think that's all I have. Like I said, we'll be covering some similar items in the mobile offer class coming up. Sheila, do you know when that is? Is it the 23rd?
No,
It's not the 23rd.
it's next week. It is on the 9th. Negotiating, oh, no, that's home inspections. We'll send it out. I don't
On
want
the
to,
calendar.
yeah. Next week is home inspections, negotiating home inspections.
Oh, hey, I wanted to let you know, Sheila, Carrie Whitehead is willing to speak on that.
Okay,
Carrie
awesome.
Whitehead wants to be one of the speakers.
Okay. Sounds good.
Uh,
Thank you guys so much. I'm going to stop the recording and you guys have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Have a great